In October 1973, the most powerful economy on Earth was brought to its knees. Not by a missile, not by an army, by oil. Within weeks, gas stations across America ran dry. Factories shut down. Grocery prices doubled. A nation that had just landed men on the moon was asking its citizens to turn off their Christmas lights to save energy. But the gas lines were never the real story. The real story happened in a closed room between Henry Kissinger and the Saudi royal family. This is the oil crisis. And this is what it actually did to the world. To understand what broke in 1973, you have to understand what was working. After World War II, the United States emerged as the dominant economic force on the planet. Its factories were untouched by the war. Production lines are running, every machine intact. Its military was unmatched. The largest force the world had ever assembled, still standing. And its currency, the dollar, was the undisputed anchor of the global financial system. Under the Bretton Woods Agreement signed in 1944, every major currency on Earth was pegged to the US dollar, and the dollar itself was pegged to gold, at a fixed rate of $35 per ounce. The system was stable, predictable, and built on a simple promise. If you held dollars, you were essentially holding gold. The same thing, guaranteed. And oil in this world was almost embarrassingly cheap. At $3 a barrel, energy costs were so low they were barely a consideration. American cars were enormous, chrome-heavy, fuel-hungry machines built for size, not efficiency. Designed with complete indifference to efficiency. No one was counting the cost. Cheap oil felt like a permanent condition of the modern world. Infinite. Assumed. But beneath the surface, two cracks were forming, and the world had no idea. The first appeared in 1971. Quiet, almost invisible, until it wasn't. The United States had been running large deficits to fund the Vietnam War. There were far more dollars circulating in the world than there was gold in Fort Knox to back them. Foreign governments, growing nervous, began converting their dollar reserves into gold. America was hemorrhaging gold. The vault is draining. The promise breaking. On August 15, 1971, President Nixon made a decision that would alter everything. He appeared on national television. The announcement lasted 11 minutes. The world changed. He suspended the convertibility of the dollar to gold. The link has been severed permanently. The Bretton Woods system, the foundation of post-war global finance, was over. The dollar was now backed by nothing but trust in United States government. The world accepted it nervously. Central banks held their breath. No one moved first. It accepted it. Because there was no obvious alternative. The dollar had no competitor. The second crack appeared 2 years later, and it was far louder. On October 6, 1973, Egypt and Syria launched a coordinated surprise offensive against Israel. The Yom Kippur War had begun. The United States responded immediately, airlifting weapons and supplies to Israeli forces, providing full diplomatic cover, making its position unmistakably clear. Inside OPEC headquarters, the Arab oil ministers watched. On October 17, 1973, Arab members of OPEC announced a total oil embargo. A total oil embargo against the United States, Western Europe, and Japan. Simultaneously, they cut production by 5% per month, deliberately tightening global supply with every week that passed. The price of oil went from $3 a barrel to $12 a barrel in under 4 months, a 400% increase in 4 months. What followed was economic devastation on a scale the post-war generation had never experienced. Oil is not simply a fuel. It is an input into almost everything. The fertilizer that grows food, the plastic in manufactured goods, the energy that runs factories, powers ships, and heats homes. When oil quadruples in price, the price of everything connected to it follows. Inflation exploded across the developed world. Supply chains buckled. Factories that could not absorb the energy cost increases began laying off workers. Gas stations started closing on Sundays, then permanently. The ones that stayed open enforced strict rationing, 10 gallons per customer, lines stretching 2 to 3 hours long. President Nixon appeared on national television, urging Americans to lower their thermostats to 68 degrees. Stop decorating with Christmas lights. The federal government imposed a nationwide 55-mile-per-hour speed limit. The United Kingdom moved to a compulsory 3-day working week. It could no longer afford to power its offices and factories for 5. The economists encountered something their models said was impossible. Inflation and unemployment were rising simultaneously. In classical economic theory, these forces were supposed to offset each other. High inflation meant a hot economy. High unemployment meant a cold one. Both at once had no name, no precedent, and no solution in any textbook written before 1973. They called it stagflation. And the Western world spent the better part of a decade trying to escape it. By the spring of 1974, the embargo was lifted. Arab nations had made their point. The war had ended in a ceasefire. OPEC released the valve. But the damage had exposed something America could not ignore. A coalition of oil-producing nations had, without firing a single weapon, destabilized every major Western economy simultaneously. The most powerful military force in human history had no answer for it. Energy, it turned out, was a weapon more precise and more destructive than anything in any arsenal. That vulnerability could never be acceptable again. Henry Kissinger, Secretary of State, architect of American foreign policy, one of the most strategically calculating figures of the 20th century, Kissinger began working on a solution. In a series of meetings deliberately kept away from the public record, Kissinger negotiated an arrangement with Saudi Arabia that would quietly reshape the entire global financial order. Saudi Arabia would price its oil exclusively in US dollars. It would use its influence within OPEC to ensure all member nations did the same. Every country on Earth that needed oil would first need to acquire US dollars. In exchange, the United States would provide Saudi Arabia with military protection, weapons, security guarantees, and political cover. The House of Saud would be shielded from external threats and internal instability. The relationship would be permanent and unconditional. Saudi Arabia agreed. OPEC followed. The global oil market became entirely dollar-denominated. Japan needed oil from the Gulf. It needed dollars first. Germany, India, Brazil, South Korea, every nation industrializing, every economy growing. Every country that ran on energy needed dollars before it could buy the fuel that kept its lights on. The dollar, which 2 years earlier had been cut loose from gold and was backed by nothing, was suddenly backed by something more universally valuable than any metal in any vault. It was backed by the energy requirements of the entire human civilization. This arrangement acquired a name, the Petrodollar system, and it became the invisible foundation of the modern global economy. The gold standard ended in 1971. The world needed something to replace it. What replaced it was oil, and the country that controlled the oil agreement controlled the currency that controlled the world. A deal made in secret, without your knowledge or consent, is still running the world you live in today. That decision, made in secret, without your knowledge or consent, is still running the world you live in today. The petrodollar system did not simply stabilize the dollar after the gold standard collapsed. It restructured the rules of global finance in ways that persist to this day. The first consequence was structural privilege. The US could now run deficits that would have destroyed any other currency, and the world absorbed it. When America spent beyond its means, it printed dollars. those dollars were absorbed by a world that needed them to buy oil. The inflationary pressure that should have followed was distributed globally rather than concentrated domestically. No other nation in history has held this advantage. Economists call it the exorbitant privilege. It is the direct inheritance of the 1974 Kissinger deal. The second consequence was institutional control. The IMF, the World Bank, both operate exclusively in dollars. A nation in crisis borrows dollars, repays in dollars. The terms are set in dollars. The petrodollar system and the global lending architecture became mutually reinforcing pillars of American financial dominance. The third consequence was geopolitical enforcement. In the year 2000, Saddam Hussein announced that Iraq would begin pricing its oil in euros rather than dollars. 3 years later, the United States invaded Iraq. In 2009, Muammar Gaddafi proposed a pan-African gold-backed currency to replace the dollar in African oil transactions. By 2011, a NATO-backed intervention had ended his government and his life. Whether these connections constitute direct causation remains a matter of historical debate, but the pattern has been noted by economists, foreign policy scholars, and governments across the developing world. The fourth consequence was the shape of global inequality. Every nation holding dollar reserves is quietly subsidizing American borrowing. Every time a central bank in Southeast Asia or Latin America holds U.S. Treasury bonds as its foreign reserves, they are lending money to Washington at artificially low rates. The petrodollar system transfers wealth, quietly and continuously, from the periphery of the global economy toward its center. 50 years later, that system is showing signs of strain. China is negotiating oil deals in yuan. Russia is pricing exports in alternative currencies. Saudi Arabia has begun quietly entertaining trades outside the dollar framework. Whether the petrodollar era is ending or simply evolving is one of the defining financial questions of the coming decade. But one thing is not in question. The oil crisis of 1973 did not just change how the world spends money. It determined who gets to decide what money is worth. And that decision, made in secret, without your knowledge or consent, is still running the world you live in today. The 1973 oil crisis is remembered as a story about gas lines and inflation, about Cold War politics and Middle Eastern conflict. But the gas lines were the surface. Beneath them, the architecture of the global monetary system was being permanently rebuilt. Not in a legislature, not in a public debate, but in closed meetings between diplomats and monarchs, with no press in the room and no vote being taken. What replaced gold was oil, and the country that controlled the oil agreement controlled the currency that controlled the world. 50 years later, that system is showing signs of strain. China is pricing oil in yuan. Russia has abandoned the dollar for exports. Saudi Arabia is quietly exploring alternatives. Whether the petrodollar era is ending or simply evolving is one of the defining financial questions of the coming decade. But one thing is not in question. The oil crisis of 1973 did not just change how the world spends money. It determined who gets to decide what money is worth. And that decision, made in secret, without your knowledge or consent, is still running the world you live in today. A deal made in a closed room between a diplomat and a king 50 years ago, still running the world you live in today.